Good evening, Europe. I'm Monica Maggioni.
And I'm Conor McNally. Welcome to a Eurovision First.
Thank you, everybody. Tonight we are live in more than 30 countries on TV, on the internet, and on radio. With us are the 5 main candidates to be president of the European Commission. It's their chance to tell 400 million voters why they should get Europe's biggest job. Why? Because your vote will help decide which of them becomes the next president of the European Commission.
We are live from the European Parliament in Brussels. Tonight, you will play a key role in the debate by tweeting the issues that matter to you using the hashtag #TellEurope.
Before we start, here are the rules for tonight. The candidates will have only 1 minute to reply to each question. They will have 3 opportunities to come back with 30 seconds of rebuttal. We ask the candidates to speak English to facilitate translation into 23 other languages. 3 of them have agreed to do so. The order in which the candidates speak was decided in a draw earlier today. But before we start with our debate, let me give the floor to Martin Schulz, President of the European Parliament, for a short remembrance of Jean-Luc Dehaene.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, today suddenly our colleague Jean-Luc Dehaene died. He was an outstanding member of the European Parliament and a long-serving Prime Minister of Belgium. His successor, Guy Verhofstadt, is with us here. I would like to ask Guy to honor for a short moment his predecessor and this outstanding member of the Parliament. Guy.
I want to open this debate by paying tribute, ladies and gentlemen, to a colleague of us, Jean-Luc Dehaene, who passed away today. And Jean-Claude Juncker and myself were his colleagues in the European Council. And I can tell you, he was a great European, a great statesman. He was also the Vice President of the Convention, together with Valéry Giscard d'Estaing and with Giuliano Amato, and that was also the way the Lisbon Treaty was born. It was somebody who was always using the truth and who was really saying things who were not always popular, but he had the courage to do so. So my request to you, all of you, is to dedicate this debate to him and to commemorate a great man and a great European.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt. And we start again from your side, because you're going to be the first one who has the right of the opening statement. 1 minute is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, these are crucial elections, and I know every time when there are elections, politicians are saying that they are crucial. But this time it's the truth. We are with our European continent, the European Union, on a crossroad. We need to make a very important choice, or the choice to go back to our old nation states, as some candidates are proposing, or to going forward in the sense of a more integrated Europe. And I think the choice is obvious. If you want to solve problems like climate change, like unemployment, like bad financial products coming from the other side of the ocean, we need European cooperation. We need a European Union who is stronger and who can defend his model against China, against India, against the US. Europe is a chance to regain sovereignty for our people and for our citizens.
Thank you so much. We go to the other side of the row, and I give the floor to Alexis Tsipras.
I'm Alexis Tsipras. I'm from Greece for the European Left Party, the country which has been chosen as the guinea pig for this economic experiment. This is something which has not affected or been afflicting any other country in the continent. And I'd like to just say a word to the candidates who have supported that whole programme and say that what happened in Greece, is that a success, or is it which must be replicated, or is it a Greek tragedy which must not be replicated anywhere else? We want to call out to reach out to citizens and say support the parties on the left, so that we can put an end to the catastrophic austerity policy and win back, restore democracy to Europe, so that we can get back to solidarity, social cohesion and democracy, which are the European values.
And let's give the floor to Jean-Claude Juncker. Your opening statement.
Moi, je voudrais que l'Europe...
I would like Europe to become a Europe of more solidarity and to put an end to divisions between North and South, and for us to continue to consolidate our public finances, but also to put growth and jobs at the heart of our action. I don't think that we can spend more money than we have. We need to replace debt by ideas and by realizing and achieving the single digital market. I think we need to be strong when we negotiate with the US. We need this free trade treaty, but we also need to respect European standards. I'd like us to establish a European Union of energy so that we are no longer dependent on Russia. I'd like Europe to be a great Europe, a Europe which can deal with the big issues, but that it does not get involved too much in small things. Otherwise, that's a big problem for us.
Martin Schulz, it's the time for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. We are living in a Europe where taxpayers have to pay for speculators. Speculators make millions of profits and don't pay taxes. And when they make billions of losses, the taxpayers have to pay for them. We live in a European Union where 6 million young men and women are unemployed. They are paying with their life chances and their future for crises other people have caused. Therefore, I want a European Union which is just and fair, which is putting the interests of ordinary citizens first. And therefore my commission, a commission, by the way, a gender-balanced one, because the inequality between men and women is another shame in the European Union, will be a commission fighting against tax fraud, tax evasion, and for employment and life chances, especially for the young generation. That's what I'm standing for and I ask the support for.
Thank you. Ska Keller, with you, we close the first tour of the opening statement.
What I want to tell tonight to this audience here, but also to the people who are watching on television or over web stream, is that from 22nd to 25th of May, it's your choice. You decide what direction Europe will take. And we Greens and we offer an alternative Europe. I am fighting for Europe that cares about people more than it cares about banks. A Europe where we revive the European dream of not letting anybody fall anymore, of caring for everybody. A social Europe, one of solidarity, and then one that is again at the forefront of fighting climate change, because this will also determine our future. I offer as Europe of solidarity, of democracy, and of the people. That's what I'm fighting for. And you decide from May 22nd to May 25. Here's our offer, and I really hope that you're going to be with us, that you're voting and also fighting on the streets for better, for new Europe.
Thank you. And here I see Connor again, because I think you're going to explain us how you at home could be with us tonight through social media.
Absolutely, Monica. So on the screen here, you can see our Tell Europe social media hub, where Eurovision editors are coordinating an international team of experts from public service radio and TV from across Europe. They're working hard right now, engaging with people on the web. We have social media editors here tonight from Austria, France, Finland, Italy, Spain and the UK. Many more are working with us online, including public service media from the Czech Republic, Germany, Ireland, Slovenia and elsewhere. We're not only inviting citizens from all across the European Union to have their say, but we're watching and listening to you as well. I can tell you there's already a lot of activity. I'll bring you more details on that shortly, but already Europe's economy is a major talking point. Monica.
Yes, and this is exactly why in our first group of questions we will start from economy. So again, the first one to speak will be Ska Keller, and the question is, more than 5 million young people are out of work. How would you, as Commission President, give them back their future?
I think the question of youth unemployment is exactly that, what we need to put on the top of the agenda. And I, as a Commission President, would absolutely do so. Because we cannot have a European Union where all of a generation is being lost and where people lose their faith and their perspective in a better life in future. So youth unemployment is what we need to tackle. How are we going to do that? I think we can only create sustainable jobs for people in Europe if we create a greener economy, a more sustainable economy. Because in the areas of renewable energy, of energy efficiency, but also in education and health, that's where the jobs lie that are going to be with us for 20 or for 50 years. And those jobs are also creating a real benefit for the society. But they also have to create good quality jobs for people. And very important, young people did not cause this crisis. We have to give them a much greater say in order to prevent future ones.
Alexis Tsipras, how are you going to address this issue?
Thank you. Well, if we continue with the disastrous policy of austerity, we're never going to solve the unemployment problem. Let's not kid ourselves, because we are seeing structural unemployment. And the EU has found liquidity to recapitalise banks, but we've not been able to find the money to go into providing young people with jobs. And we must go forward with generous solutions for Europe, a European New Deal, a new deal on employment, which will be by means of development and growth. The disastrous policy of austerity is no way to address the big problem facing Europe, which is unemployment, which is marginalisation as well, and especially youth unemployment, which has taken on explosive dimensions, especially in the south.
5 million. So how are you going to work?
6 million young people, around 6 million young men and women, perhaps the best educated generation we ever had on our continent, are unemployed. And in those countries where the unemployment rate is highest, we have the problem that the backbone of the economy there, small and medium enterprises, have no access to credits. Banks are getting money for 0.25% from the ECB and are not investing in real economy. They are once more speculating. A microcredit program of my Commission for small and medium enterprises in those countries where the unemployment rate is highest, by combining the funds of the European Union with the money of the European investment banks for SMEs, for small and medium enterprises, and those who employ young men and women will get a privilege on the interest rates or the reimbursement time. This is a project to relaunch economy on one hand by supporting small and medium enterprises and to fight concretely against the unemployment of young people.
Thank you. Jean-Claude Juncker.
Employment presupposes jobs. There's no sustainable employment with healthy, balanced public finances not in place. So we need to continue responsible discipline on public finances without excessive austerity. Since we don't have any money, we have to work on ideas. The single market can create 8.5 million jobs by a digital single market, and we're looking at stable jobs, not insecure jobs, solid jobs. Youth mobility has to become more easily accessible. Young people need to be able to study in several countries. I'd like to see young people able to move and grasp opportunities where they are.
Here we are. Guy Verhofstadt, what's your vision on this?
Well, what I have heard now are the old recipes that didn't work the last 5 years in Europe. So I think that instead of continuing conservative recipes or the socialist recipes where we are making more debt, we need a new approach. And the new approach, in my opinion, is to go back to the initial idea of Jacques Delors when he launched the internal market. To use an intelligent socialist, Martin. You're not always intelligent, but he was intelligent, that's true. And I have to tell you... yeah, well, maybe... can I again have the seconds of Mr. Schulz now, because he's intervening? But what we want to do is to have a new... Okay, what we have to do is to start a new wave of integration in the European Union. But in the key markets we have today, capital markets, bank, digital, telecom, energy, that is what we need, using the scale of the European Union to make a new leap forward in the integration and having new growth. Like we did in the 80s, like Delors succeed, we can succeed either this time.
Okay, and so, about recipes, governments in Europe very often claim that austerity measures are working, but with so many people out of work, is the medicine killing the patient? Would you have done something in a different way? Skakala.
Absolutely. I think austerity is just bringing us deeper and deeper into the crisis. We now have 26, 27 million people unemployed. And just over the austerity years, more than 6 million jobs have been actually lost. So it's very clear that the recipe of austerity has not worked. It has just worsened the situation. We have to overcome that. Instead of austerity, we have to invest into the economy, but into a greener economy, because we need to create sustainable jobs, jobs that will still be there in a couple of decades, and jobs that give good quality life for people. And that, I really believe, can only happen if we invest, for example, in renewable energy, in energy efficiency, and education and health. Unfortunately, we missed the chance in the last multi-annual financial framework, the long-term budget of the European Union, where we've been proposing more green investments, but unfortunately we didn't find support from the Conservatives and the Social Democratic group, because I think this would be the right way forward. Investment is the key word, not austerity.
And what's your position, Alexis Tsipras?
First of all, can I say that Guy's ideas, perhaps he thinks they're new, but I think they're very old indeed. They were the ideas that got us into this crisis. They were the ones which caused the problem in 2009. They're the ones which caused the bubble in the US. And they're the ones which, through this crisis management, we've ended up with the Europe that we have, with all the big dangers. We have to begin with social cohesion and jobs and development. We have to stop with recession, stop with austerity. And we must stop with this paranoia of debt. We have got to give that a European dimension and do something along the lines of what happened with Germany in 1953, when a moment of solidarity, when a huge chunk of that debt was cancelled, and where there was a growth clause built into what happened after that. Unless we do that, we have to rerun that from 1953, otherwise we're going to end up with depression and recession.
Martin Schulz.
I would have done things absolutely differently. The combination between budgetary discipline on one hand, which is unavoidable and necessary, and strategic investment in growth and employment, that was the better way. We have only unilaterally cut in public budgets with the message, you must only cut, and immediately the trust of investors you will get back. Visibly, it didn't happen. What we have to never discuss is the fight against tax evasion and tax fraud. 1 billion euro every year the member states lose by tax fraud and tax evasion. So not to cut on one hand, but to fight against tax fraud and tax evasion. That would be my way, because we can't only speak about cut, we must also speak about the revenue side of the public budgets and about growth. Investments in the digital agenda, investments in the grids for energy supply are important. And the last seconds I give back to Guy Verhofstadt because I interrupted.
Thank you, Martin.
Very fair of yours. So let's move to Jean-Claude Juncker. Being 5 years back, would you do the same?
C'est une question facile et difficile.
Well, that is an easy and difficult question at the same time. Everyone is speaking as if they were hearing of these problems for the first time today. The Liberals, the Socialists and the Christian Democrats were the ones who managed the crisis. Obviously, we need to stand back and look at the management of it now. But the Socialists and the Liberals and the Christian Democrats were working together on it. Of course, investment is necessary. Why does Europe not invest enough? Well, because our budgets don't allow us to do that. And our budgets don't allow us to do that because we have built up debt and deficits. Those who do that need to do are preventing future forward-looking investments to take place. We have to put public finances in order first.
Here. And Guy Verhofstadt, 1 minute
Yes,
or
I
five.
want also to react with those saying that, that it's not necessary to have fiscal discipline. You need fiscal discipline, otherwise you cannot have growth on the midterm and the long term. There is proof of that in all parts of the world. But next to that, and that is true, and that has been forgotten the last 5 years, you need a new strategy of growth. And growth, that means not making new debts, because we cannot afford ourselves. If you have most of the countries more than 100% debt, it's not their budget who shall create new investment. You have to do it in a more intelligent way. And the more intelligent way is to use the size of Europe, this enormous market of 500 million. Let me give you one example, digital. We have already discussed about digital. If in America, Apple wants to start with a new product, they go to the 4 main operators, they have a deal, and they start immediately to spread a new product. If we have to do it, we need, in 28 different countries, 100 operators to do it. And that's the reason why they have Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, Microsoft, what are all American companies, and we need still to do that.
Your time is over, even with the 5
That's
seconds that, you use them, but I've seen, by the way, I've seen Ska Keller asking for a rebuttal, so.
Yes, I'm using my first blue card, my first joker in this, because Mr. Juncker and Mr. Verhofstadt have been bringing up the issue of the debt is the problem. But if we look at Spain had a budget surplus before the banking crisis. It was the debt of the banks that were actually put on the shoulders of the taxpayers, on the shoulders of the state budget. So I think we rather have to go in there. We have to stop speculation. We have to make sure that banks rescue themselves rather than us telling taxpayers to have to rescue the banks rather than states rescuing the banks. That, I think, is the big flaw on this crisis.
These were
maybe
your
I use
30
my 30 seconds?
You go and use your joker as well. Go ahead.
Now, simply to say that I agree with Ska Keller, but we did something on the European level the last years. We made the banking union. For the first time with the banking union, it shall be banks themselves, based on their risk profile, we shall contribute to the fund, so to recapitalize banks, and not longer taxpayers. It's a good example, and Mr. Barnier is there in the meeting room, and I want to say, fantastic what you did on financial regulation. Fantastic what you did on the banking union, because it's not longer taxpayers who shall pay the bill today.
Well, the capital requirements are actually great success.
Very good exchange, and let me tell you that we're exactly in the middle of our next question, so you're going to have the chance to stay on this, because in the social media these days, there's a lot about this. But before we switch to the next question, Alexis Kipros. No, someone is telling me something which is definitely wrong.
What subject? Have you asked me a question yet?
Reacted to the same question all over till now, I think. So I think we move to the next question and then we decide what to do.
Well, I also have a joker. Because there's plenty more to say on these subjects.
Let me tell you something. These days we are a lot in the social networks, and what we've just seen is that banks and these kind of things are in the middle of the discussion in social networks. So a lot of people blame banks for the crisis. In your Europe, would banks be more tightly regulated? So it was, again, you.
Yes, a very clear yes from my side. We do need to regulate banks more clearly. And what you have just said about the banking union, successes like that, banks have to stock up more money in order to rescue themselves. That's a green success. And we also say that we need to have financial markets regulation, for example, in separating retail from investment banks. So it's not the money, you know, it's not the earnings of the grandmother or the grandfather who get lost in global speculation. That, I think, is very important. We need to regulate financial markets much closer. And by the way, it's not 1 billion euros that get lost every year through tax evasions. It's 1 trillion euros every year, approximately 8% of the European wealth. There, I really think we have to do something. We cannot tell people we're going to cut their salary when we're not stopping tax evasion, and if we're not capping the bonuses of bankers like we have proposed, and we have succeeded to do so as Greens in the European Parliament.
Alexis Tsipras, about the banks, it's yours.
I thought that...
Έχω μείνει άναυδος, Μόνικα, διότι...
Thank you very much. It was Guy Verhofstadt earlier on who was supporting bail-in programs in Europe after the bailout, which piled all the debt onto the taxpayers, particularly in the south of the European Union, money which will be paid back by the next generation, our children and their children. And now we are looking at solutions which are going to put the burden on people who have their deposits in those banks. And I think that's more of the same catastrophic logic for Europe. And I just wonder, does Mr. Juncker and Mr. Schulz support that logic? We take a different view. We think there must be an overall approach to the debt problem so that the banks can be put onto a sound basis, a healthy basis, which will mean that they can reduce the so-called red debt, which they currently have to pay back. Otherwise, we're going to be piling debts upon more debts. Thank you very much.
Martin Schulz, here we are with the bank issue.
The banking union is a first step. We have to break this spiral of banking debts and state debts. Some of our member countries were very stable in their budgets and in their sovereign debt until the banking crisis arrived. We saw this disaster in Ireland, saw the disaster in Spain. And therefore, to regulate banks and the banking union is what we achieved now, first steps. They must put under more control, and especially risk and responsibility has to bring back to one hand. What happened in the past was the banks took the risks and the taxpayers the responsibilities. And therefore, to put the banks in front of their responsibility and to force them to take their responsibility for the disaster they created in Europe is the next step. The European Parliament and the European Commission has to undertake. And what was missing is that Michel Barnier in the Commission was sufficiently supported to go further than he could go, and therefore my Commission will control the banks much severe than it happened.
We definitely too long, Jean-Claude Juncker.
No, for my seconds.
Moi, je voudrais...
I don't want to spend our time discussing how the world was. Things have changed. Thanks to Michel Barnier and the Commission in the banking sector, we've reorganised matters. Banks are now responsible. We've bailed out banks, not for the sake of the bankers. I don't care about that. We're trying to protect savers and small and medium-sized enterprises who need access to credit. We did this because the real economy would have collapsed if the financial system had collapsed. And I don't accept us saying that we've only applied austerity policies. That's not right. In the beginning of the crisis, 2008, 2009, we invested 70 to 80 billion euros to protect a wobbly economy. And we have really practiced Keynesian policies right from the beginning of the crisis. We didn't make the same mistakes as in the 1930s. Let's not make these false comparisons.
Well, I think banks are a good example why we need more Europe. And we have done it. But we have to go further. We have to make in the contributions of the banks a differentiation between investment banks and savings banks. I think that investment banks, they represent a higher risk and have to pay a higher contribution to the fund than, for example, saving banks. And we have to go in that direction. But that said, Mr. Tsipras, in Greece, like in Italy and in Portugal, it was not a question of banks. It was a question of bad policies in your country by the two big parties, by PASOK and Nea Demokratia, who was the real origin of the crisis there. And because in your country, there are mainly only public banks. Public banks were financing the political parties, still financing the political parties in Greece. Also, Mr. Tsipras, also your party, because you have also taken a loan from these public banks in the past future.
Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt. I look at Mr. Tsipras. Are you going to rebut? Are you going to use it? Okay, he's using his joker to rebut.
Yes, let me just give you a very quick reply.
Seconds back.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to have your seconds back, but...
Yeah, on the question of public banks and private banks, I would agree with you. There were public banks, and there was clientelism, cronyism, and then there were parties, particularly the two biggest parties in Europe. Mr. Schulz's and Mr. Juncker's parties were the main ones involved there. Certainly, if you look at the crisis in Greece, look over the period, and you'll see that actually the medicine made the patient sicker rather than better. Of course, the banking crisis in Ireland was rather different. But there's a question here for all of us. Was the overall diagnosis, was it successful or a failure?
I'm sorry.
I got no answer on the 6 million loan of Mr. Tsipras' party.
Mr. Juncker, you're going to use your rebut.
I would like to add, given that we are talking about Greece, that for years I worked day and night, and more often at night than during the day, to avoid Greece having to leave the euro area. I did everything because I love Greece and I love the Greek people. I did everything to ensure that Greece could stay in the euro area and so that the financial markets would not continue to speculate against Greece. I would accept many reproaches, but I will never accept that reproach that we did not show sufficient solidarity towards Greece. We did everything to ensure that Greece could remain in the eurozone, as it should.
And I'm going to ask the public not to waste too much time, but let's say for a second in this idea that many Europeans are disillusioned. So please use your next minute to explain to those who think that it's time to leave EU, why should they stay in? First is Ska Keller again, because this was the draw this morning.
What I would tell people who are thinking about maybe EU is not such a good thing. And actually, I wouldn't tell them. I would first listen, because that's what I do a lot of times. And then people tell me that they actually have a lot of expectation into the European Union. They ask the European Union to take care of their social rights, to care about their pension rights, to do something about their children's future. And I think that's exactly what we have to deliver. I think mistrust in EU institutions, that is sure the mistrust of like Commission, of Council not having delivered, but there is still a lot of belief in this European dream of working together, of achieving a better life all together. And I think that is really the thing we have to strive for. We need more Europe to get out of the crisis in the right ways. We need the right policies in Europe in order to make it a better life and a better Europe for all of us. That's the message I want to give to all those people who maybe feel disillusioned. Take this Europe, make it yours, make it a better Europe.
Alexis Tsipras, what's your message?
The growth in Euroscepticism has got people who are responsible for that. And the big culprits are the big three parties who can only talk about austerity. That's the only, it's got to be more of the same medicine. Those are the culprits. That's the reason why there is such a lot of Euroscepticism. People are critical of Europe. We've got to give them an alternative. And the alternative is not for Europe to be disbanded. we've got to save it, but also change its nature. The Europe is only going to be attractive to young people. It's only going to be attractive for working people if it simply is equated with pain and hardship and suffering. On the contrary, it's got to be different. We've got to address the real danger. We've got to provide a vision by having a different policy, an alternative to austerity. Thank you.
I don't know if citizens who are looking and listening to our debate are convinced that we need more Europe. I think they wait, and they are waiting for another Europe, a Europe which is putting their interest first, on the first place of the action of the European institutions. We are discussing here in Brussels also tonight about trillions or billions, 15 billion, 20 billion, 100 billion. We are discussing about who is responsible for what in the past. 96% of our citizens live with 1,000 and 2,000 euros a month. And they have the feeling that those who are discussing exclusively about billions or trillions are not interested in their individual faith, in the future of their children. What we lost is the biggest capital of the European Union, trust. I want to regain trust of the citizens for the Union by saying we fight against your poverty, against your misery, and we give your children a life chance for their future. Then we will get back Europe on track.
Jean-Claude Juncker.
Il est vrai que nous parlons.
It's true that we talk about billions too much, but we spend too many billions that we don't have. So I think we need to stay credible. If we conclude a free trade agreement with the United States, each European citizen is going to earn something like 565 euros extra. So I would like to see people living from the fruit of their labour. I would like to see minimum social standards for workers. If we lose the citizens of Europe, then Europe will lose credibility.
I think that we have to tell the truth, and certainly in the south of Europe, where many people want to get rid of the euro. And we have to tell them, first, it should be a disaster for all the economies in Europe. For all the economies, and in the north and in the south, if we go back to national currencies. And the second thing is, you have to ask yourself the question, who shall pay the bill if we return to the drachma in Greece, to the lira in Italy, to the peseta in Spain? Who shall pay the bill of that? We shall have, again, the competitive devaluations of the past. You remember Italy, every 2-3 years, making a devaluation to be competitive with their economy. Well, who is paying the bill of a devaluation? The ordinary people, the ordinary citizens, because they shall lose a part of their purchasing power. And also pensioners, who shall lose a part of their savings. That is the reality. So we have to tell to the ordinary citizens, going back to national currencies is mainly against your personal interest and is not a solution for our problems.
Ska Keller asked for a rebuttal, so let's listen to her rebuttal before.
I'm going to use my second joker to address Mr. Juncker, because you have mentioned the transatlantic trade agreement with the US, which I think is precisely one of those things why people lose that trust in the European Union, because the Commission is negotiating secret trade deals behind closed doors. No. We have people, citizens, who are peacefully demonstrating today on the streets of Brussels against this trade agreement. And what happens? They're all getting arrested. This is not the European Union that I want. I don't want to have trade deals like this. Trade deals should be of benefit for the people here as well as in our partner countries. And trade deals like this make us lose trust in the European Union, unfortunately.
Thank you. So, shall we stop here by now? Because I see Connor again. So, what's going on in the social media right now?
Well, Monica, let me tell you, you're certainly keeping our social media team very busy tonight. In the middle of that round, you're tweeting at a rate of over 1,000 tweets every minute. We can take a look now at what we're calling the Twitter Pulse. This lets us visualize just how much you're tweeting. Right now, that's at around 701 tweets every minute. A total there of 58,000 for today. So let me take you through some of those. Actually, before we do that, let's take a look at the word cloud, because that helps us visualize what subjects you're talking about. As we speak, our technology is plucking the keywords from any tweet that is using the Tell Europe hashtag or mentioning any of our 5 candidates. The bigger the word you see up there on the screen, the more tweets there are containing that word. So right now, you're talking about the debate, you're talking about Roma, you're talking about Romani resistance. So let me bring you some of the tweets. During the last round, a lot of people talking about the economy, obviously. Each candidate has promised to grow the economy, but will this growth be sustainable? Should Europe be managed like a big corporation? Another one. How do the candidates plan on strengthening European foreign security? So let's leave those there. Another topic which is coming up and again and again is the European Union's relationship with other countries, regions and non-member states. So keep those tweets and comments coming in at hashtag Tell Europe. Monica.
So let's start exactly from there, and let's move together on the world scene. So we've seen these days violence in Ukraine, and Russia claims that the country is on the brink of a civil war. Where is European Union? We start with Guy Verhofstadt, this new tour.
Well, I received yesterday a letter of Garry Kasparov, the world-famous chess player, about this. And in fact, a letter to all of us, where he's saying to you, Mr. Verhofstadt, and all the candidates for the EU presidency, and to all the leaders of Europe, what will your union be worth if it fails in this crisis with Ukraine and Russia? If Ukraine is not safe, Europe is not safe, he's saying. Putin and other dictators will prove that aggression is rewarded, and the many fragile democracies in the world will understand they are on their own. You must not fail this test. Well, I think that Garry Kasparov is right. We are too weak to Russia and mainly to Putin. And what we need to do is to put together very serious, credible, personal sanctions against the people around Putin. That's the only language that he shall understand.
Alexis Tsipras, what's your position on Ukraine?
Thank you. Europe is again using the vocabulary and experimenting with Cold War language, and this is the wrong way forward. I believe that the wounds which have divided Europe cannot be closed and healed with sanctions. I think they've got to be done. That's got to be done by means of putting balm on the wounds and by talking and dialogue. And that's, I think, the message in Ukraine. We shouldn't have fascists there. That's a stigma on us and a disgrace for us. We have got to make sure that they're able to take decisions for their own future using the constitutional safeguards. We must have dialogue in the OSCE. We don't want to see military intervention either by NATO or by the Russian side either. And this is the way that we can give peace a chance. Thank you.
Ska Keller.
It's very clear. All efforts need to be made in order to achieve a peaceful solution. And for that, we need to have dialogue, a strengthened dialogue. We need a lot of dialogue. But we also need to make very clear that we will not accept some of the issues that Putin has been doing, not the annexation of the Crimea. It's very clear to be strong on that. So I think the sanctions that were imposed were right. But we also need to do other things. For example, we should talk about the arms that are currently still being exported by European Union member states to Russia. That urgently needs to stop, because else other sanctions are simply not doing their job. Also, we are very dependent on Russia when it comes to energy. And I can safely say that we Greens have always argued for more energy independence, and we finally need to get a grip on this. We finally need to get going. And how do we achieve energy efficiency? By investing in our own renewable resources. Those will make us independent, and that will also put ourselves on a more sustainable economy.
Thank you, Jean-Claude Juncker. Didn't we need for a stronger European position?
Nous avons dit non à M.
We said no to Mr. Putin. His conduct is completely unacceptable. We imposed sanctions. They haven't gone far enough, and therefore we need to step up the intensity of sanctions against Russia if Russia does not change its behavior, and that will affect the financial flows between Russia and European financial centers. But we don't want to go to war. Europe is a soft power. We have known enough wars. We have enough military cemeteries in Europe. We need to dialogue with Russia, but to do so, we need to say no to Mr. Putin on behalf of European standards. His conduct is completely unacceptable.
Claude Juncker, Martin Schulz.
We are discussing about war. You should be honest. There is a real risk of civil war in Ukraine. And your question was the role of the European Union?
Absolutely.
The European Union is not a military power. And whatever we can do to avoid military confrontation, which is not a theoretical question, which is really possible, we should do. Therefore, we need a combined strategy. On one hand, I'm absolutely in favor, by the way, also to support our Central and Eastern member states, that in case of necessity, tough sanctions should be decided and realized. But until then, we need, on the other hand, another strategy, the strategy the foreign affairs ministers of the European Union tried to achieve with the second Geneva round. And the most important point is to achieve that on the 25th of May, presidential elections are possible, because a new elected president could be an interlocutor also for the government of Russia.
Thank you. And let's move to another subject, because in EU there are many, in some states there are independent movements. I think of Scotland, I think of Catalonia and some others. If they become independent, should they get automatically the EU membership, according to you? Let's start again with Mr.
Well, in my opinion, and then we are talking especially, I come from Barcelona, I was there yesterday. I think that the European Union has not to involve in that. It's a question of Spain and the Catalans, in my opinion, and certainly not in the negative way intervening, as we have seen Mr. Barroso and other leaders of the PPE the last weeks. Let's decide them, Spain and the Catalans. It's not a question for the European Union to intervene in such a question. And I think it's also necessary to take into account what people think, because we cannot build up a European Union in which the voice of the citizens is not counting in such important question. And in any way, we have to play a positive role in the dialogue between Spain and the Catalans, not a negative one, as we have seen by this leader of the Commission, Mr. Barroso, the last weeks and the last months.
Thank you. Alexis Tsipras, which is your position on this issue?
The European left respects the right of peoples to self-determination. Nevertheless, we believe that nationalisms, conflicts and tensions between peoples and ethnic groups can never lead to any positive outcome. We do not believe that we should encourage changing borders. We must respect the right of peoples to decide on their future, to determine their own futures on the basis of international law. In the case of Catalonia or Scotland, I think that there could well be a kind of enhanced devolution, if you like, within the general framework, and a greater degree of independence and autonomy. Ukraine, however, is a bridge between Russia and Europe. It shouldn't be a great gulf or a divide between the two groups. And they have to decide whether they want to go down a federal path which may pave the way to peace and reconciliation.
For me, the right of people to decide about their future is very important. So I think also the people in Scotland and in Catalonia should have the right to decide about their future and about the future of their state. And if I was Commission President, then I would very much welcome both those, if in case they would decide to become independent, I would welcome them as well in the European Union.
So there was just a little technical detail here, and let's go to Jean-Claude Juncker.
I think it would be wise for us not to become involved in this debate. This is something which is a UK and Spanish competence. I'm in favour of always abiding by the national constitutions. The national constitutions must be respected. As far as everything else goes, we should keep our silence.
Martin Schulz, or you want to use your...
We are not a federal state. The European Union is not a federal state. We are a union of sovereign countries, and there is no blueprint for us because the countries decide on the basis of their national constitutions differently. As the colleague Keller mentioned, in Scotland there will be a referendum in the autumn. In other countries, a kind of referendum is not foreseen. Therefore, for the European Union, it's not possible to answer to the question in one way. If, for example, Scotland will vote for independence and sovereignty and become a sovereign country, then we have a procedure to join the European Union. But in other countries, this is completely different. So we see what happens in Great Britain with the Scottish referendum, but this is not possible to transfer to other countries. Therefore, we have no blueprint, and we have to accept what happens in the frame of national constitutions.
Thank you very much. Let me move to a very different subject, because today in Italy we've seen very disturbing pictures about what happened off coast of Lampedusa. So let me just ask you all as candidates, if you considered the immigration an issue that should address to member states or to the European Union?
Yeah, not member states, because member states are now responsible. We need a common immigration policy, but not what we have now. We need a legal, economic migration policy, the fastest in the Union. Australia has that, Canada has that, United States of America has that, and we don't have. And the consequence of it is that we have more and more illegal migration because we don't have a legal migration policy. And the second consequences of it is that we have more and more human trafficking inside our borders. So we need a common policy on that level. And secondly, we need also on refugees, asylum, to have not this competition between member states, but one system, and also fair agreements between the different member states. Look what's happening in Syria. What have we done for refugees coming from Syria? They are all going to Turkey, to Jordan, and only a few thousands have been met in Europe. And I find it a scandal if you look to the tragedy happening in Syria.
Alexis Tsipras, immigration issue.
First of all, let me say that it seems odd that we're trying to solve a global problem such as flows of people across borders at a time when the European Union is party to conflict in Libya and in other parts of the planet. In other words, where people are going to be leaving from in large numbers Afghanistan. We are not able to give any kind of prospect for them, and of course they're going to be attracted to Europe. It's not simply a matter of repression. It's unacceptable if we are politicians and humanitarian to allow the Mediterranean to turn into a graveyard. And we need to have a proper asylum programme. We've got to put money into that to support economies and also have a fair sharing of the burden, because this is a burden on us. Europe has to be identical, synonymous with solidarity. Thank you very much.
What we see in Europe is simply not acceptable. We let people die in the Mediterranean. And then when Italy does a really good project, like a life-rescuing thing like Mare Nostrum, where they take migrants who are threatened to drown from their little boats, then Frontex goes around saying, oh, this is a migration risk because it will attract new migrants. This is unacceptable. And this is from a European agency. There I really want to see some strong words from the Commission to not accept that. And if we talk about legal migration, absolutely. We need legal and safe ways for refugees to come to the European Union, to ask for asylum here, because they are in dire need of protection. People who come from Syria, but also from other crisis hotspots in the world. And most of those refugees go to other places. They're not coming to Europe. And we need more legal ways for other migrants as well. But then I really wonder, why is it that no member state has agreed to even talk about legal migration? What is happening in the national governments? Does nobody see the plight of the migrants? In the European Union, where we have gained the Nobel Peace Prize, I think we should absolutely scrap this migration policy. This is a scandal.
Thank you. Jean-Claude Juncker.
Nous devons régler.
We need to have a European law which will allow for legal immigration. We cannot continue to do as we do at the moment. And having rules on legal migration will not prevent illegal migration, so we need to act in a more concerted way to tackle that issue. I think the European Union need to stop reducing their development aid budgets because we need to resolve the problems where they arise. We cannot accept that poor Asians and Africans are forced to get on boats and end up dying in the Mediterranean. We need to help these poor people and those who are suffering where they are. We need to put an end to this policy of constantly cutting development aid budgets.
Martin, it's your turn.
First of all, I'm very happy that Jean-Claude Juncker says that we need a legal immigration system. I said this last week as well and was attacked by his German friends as the chief manager of the criminal gangs in the Mediterranean, so I have now a new colleague. The legal immigration system is a system all regions in the world with immigration have. The United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Only the Europeans haven't it. We need a legal immigration system. We need a system for temporary protection of refugees from civil war regions and ecological disaster regions. And we need protection for political refugees. This is a three-step approach. Guy Verhofstadt said we need a European rule. I agree. And we should not leave it in the hands of the member states. I agree. But it is in the hands of the member states. And therefore, my commission will put the member states to their responsibility. I make such suggestions and I expect that the member states take their responsibilities.
Thank you. Thank you for your position.
On Schengen, we have taken it away. Yeah?
And okay, so let's go to, because, you know, I want to see what's happening out there in the social media, because I think that many people are trying to talk to us. So let's listen to them. Connor.
Let me tell you, it's very busy on social media tonight. You are keeping our team very busy. We are trending in 5 countries at the moment, including Spain, Italy, France and Belgium. And we can take a look now at the breakdown of languages that you're using. Take a look at the screen there. We have English, obviously, is number 1. Most popular language being used on Twitter right now, French at number 2. We can also tell you that over 10,000 individual users are engaging with each round of this debate. Keep tweeting using the hashtag #TellEurope. Monica.
Yes, I'm very interested in those words. You know, I think it's a good suggestion to go through those words and understand. But thank you so much, Connor. Let's move together to the last set of questions, because we're going to see what's next for Europe and your visions here. So for this new set of questions, the first one to answer will be Ska Keller. And let me ask you, what are your personal views about religious symbols in the EU? Should there be crucifixes in public buildings? Should women be allowed to wear headscarves in public places? What's your position? Religious symbols.
Symbols.
Thank you. Well, you already took the first 2 seconds of my time. I think religious symbols, that is not something that we necessarily have to regulate at the European level. I find it very important that the personal freedom of people is being safeguarded, and that in public spaces you have a sort of neutrality while still allowing, for instance, people who choose to wear a headscarf to appear in those public buildings. But again, it's something that we don't have to regulate at the European level, where it's very much also depending on the local context as well. But I think it's very important that the right to express one's religious freedom is upheld and supported, of course, as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's rights.
Guy Verhofstadt, what's your vision on this?
Well, I'm in favor of a European anti-discrimination law anyway. So I think that there are a number of values, Ska, who are so important that they not fall under subsidiarity. I'm sorry. When it concerns the freedom of the press, the freedom of religion, a number of other ethical issues.
How are you going to regulate crucifixes in school?
I come from a number of other ethical issues. I come from Spain now, so that means something there. Ethics for the moment, the whole discussion about abortion and abortion legislation. So I think we need the same appliance of a number of basic values by a European anti-discrimination law the fastest as possible. And
allowing it or forbidding?
If we don't do that, then we can continue like Mr. Orban is doing in Hungary. He is changing every 5 minutes the constitution to make new values in his constitution. And there you have well, the reality there is, for example, that some minorities are not protected. The reality is there that some religions cannot really be practices. So I think a European solution is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I left you 5 seconds more because of the invasion, but let's move to Jean-Claude Juncker.
I think European legislation against discrimination is essential. There are the overriding principles which need to be defended. All religions, philosophies and attitudes to life deserve respect. I don't think that the European Union should meddle in how religions and philosophies and attitudes express themselves, however. Let each European establish its principles. We won't negotiate on the principles, but we're not going to meddle in national and local and religious traditions. Europe's got enough on its plate without at all costs interfering in that sort of discussion. Principles, yes. Defence of principles, yes. But when it comes to the practice, leave it to the member states, as long as they don't breach the overriding principles.
What's your position when it comes to religion?
Thank you very much. Well, I think anyone in any of our member states have to respect the provisions of the Constitution. Of course, each member state has got to defend the rights of all citizens. There are many people who live in the European Union, and they must be able to believe in the God of their choice and act accordingly. I think that it's a bit anachronistic, and it's a backward-looking trend we've seen of late in Europe. And that's, I think, the way to people fighting over religion. It's also anachronistic and a throwback for us to see in Spain, for example, laws which prevent abortion, because that takes us back to many years into the conservative past of the Franco dictatorship. That's a danger we've got to, a pitfall we've got to guard against in the best interest of all Europeans.
I think your question was about headscarves and public...
It was about symbols, yes.
Symbols in public buildings. Taking into account the specific rules in the member states, we have to respect. One thing is quite clear, that the freedom for everybody, for every individual to show his religious belief. There are people wearing crosses, other Jewish symbols, or people who are Muslims show their belief, and non-believers show their non-belief. This is quite clear. Public spaces are neutral and have to be neutral, because in a public space everybody has a place. Therefore, we must insist in the frame of non-discrimination, public places are neutral. Private, to show what I believe, is everybody free to do. But in the public area, we can't accept that there is one tendency. And there is in the European Union a risk of a very conservative backlash, and we have to fight against that, that's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers, everybody. And let me go back to the last elections. If I look at this data, across Europe, only 43% of people voted in the last elections. Whose fault is the fact that public doesn't care? Is it your problem, our problem? Who's to blame? Skakala.
Well, I don't think that people don't care about what's happening in Europe. I think they very much care. But apparently there's a widespread feeling that this will not be, like, changes will not be affected. They will not be done by going to vote. And that, I think, is a problem, that we see a mistrust in the institutions like the European Parliament. And I think there we really have to step in. We have to make clear that we can change things in the European Union, that we have ideas. And I've been proposing what we Greens want to do for the economy, for young people, how we want to strengthen democracy, giving people and citizens more of a voice. And we need to indeed strengthen this European democracy. And by that, I don't just mean about carrying people to vote. Democracy is much more. It's about making people's voices heard all the time, not just every 5 years. But we also have to talk about issues. We have to debate every day about what is the best solution for Europe, this direction and this direction. And I think on this topical level, where people will say they're very interested in that, and I think we have to go out for 22nd to 25th of May and all advertise that you choose which direction you will go.
It's time to go to Mr. Verhofstadt.
Well, what we need is politicians who are defending Europe. Until now, we have always defended Europe with the same good argument of peace, but we need to give other arguments to the younger generation. And that is that we can create jobs, that we can fix the economy, and that also on the European level we can safeguard a number of values that are impossible to safeguard on the national level. Let me give you the example of the civil liberties and privacy. We need the fastest as possible, after NSA, after Snowden, a data protection regulation in Europe to protect the private life and the private data of our citizens, and certainly of the younger generations. And more than that, with the new decision of the European Court of Justice concerning Google, we are on the right track, because the court is saying, well, you need to have the right to be forgotten in the legislation, and you need also privacy by default. If we tackle these problems, then I'm sure young people and population shall come back to the idea of the European Union.
Thank you. Jean-Claude Juncker.
We have to stop talking about Europe as we are accustomed to talking about it. Very often the national governments shift the responsibility to Europe when they need to shoulder responsibility. The member states are responsible for everything. It's not as if they or their national parliaments do not exist. I think that we need to plead the cause of Europe once again and explain to young people that Europe is weakening and that we are losing our clout. We are only going to be 4% of the world's population at the beginning of the next century. So we're losing out demographically, and we need to tell young people that we need Europe. If we don't have Europe, and if we didn't have the euro today, all of the European countries would be engaged in a monetary war with each other. France against Germany, France against Spain. After the economic and financial crisis and after the Ukrainian crisis, it's quite clear that we need Europe. Europe protects Europeans.
Alexis Tsipras.
The biggest deficit, I think, in Europe is actually a democratic deficit, and citizens stay away because they don't really believe that their vote is going to make a big change to the strategy and the direction of Europe as it currently is. The summits are really 28 heads of state and government who decide along the lines of Chancellor Merkel's wishes. And my question to Mr. Juncker is, what's been happening behind the scenes? You, Mr. Barroso, have been talking about replacing elected governments in Italy and Greece, having them replaced by bankers and by technocrats, and imposing austerity. Why impose these things on governments at a time when you say the constitution should prevail. That's not happening in Greece for the time being.
Whose fault is this?
Your question was, what is the reason why the turnout was so low? I think in the past the European elections were boring. There was no confrontation. Secondly, it was abused for midterm election of national governments. And now we have another situation. I think the debate here shows we are changing in the European Union to more democracy, more controversial debate, more transparency. This is a step forward, but there is another element. We have 27 million unemployed people in the European Union. As we discussed, 6 million unemployed young men and women. We have the highest rate of tax fraud and tax evasion we ever had in the European Union. Taxpayers have to pay for speculators. They are waiting not for more Europe, they are waiting for another Europe. And if we debate the concrete proposals, how to change Europe for more justice and fairness, then I'm sure that we will regain trust of voters and that the turnout will be increased.
Thank you. Let's speak about corruption. How far do you think you will go to fight corruption? And second, do you also think that the lobbyists out here in the corridors of Brussels are part of the problem in some ways? Skakala.
Oh, absolutely. They're a big part of the problem because I think we have too many lobbyists going around these corridors, but not just these, also the corridors of the Commission that are highly paid, that are sent by the one or the other interest group who spent millions on those lobbyists. And what we're missing out on is the lobbyists, is the voices of the citizens. Those are the real actors. Those own the European Union, the citizens of the European Union. But they're not being heard. It's the lobbyists who find entrance here. It's the lobbyists who spend millions in influencing lawmakers, like many of ourselves, and who are influencing commissioners. And it's amazing when sometimes you see that people, like they bring in amendments where they even forget to take out the header of the letter, so you can see exactly from what industry it's in. And that needs to stop. And yes, this sort of lobbyism, that is a big problem of the European Union, and it's maybe also like similar to corruption. Lobbyism, that is not the way forward. We have to make the voices of the people, not the voices of the lobbyists.
Give it off.
Well, you cannot forbid that there are lobbyists. The problem is that from time to time, like we have seen the case the last years in this Commission, there is corruption coming from that. That is the problem. And that we have certainly to fight against and to make new rules. And we have made new rules in the last Parliament to strengthen, in fact, the fight against corruption, against lobbyists. And mainly it's about, who is representing you? What is the guy, the women representing you, and what are the ethics of these politicians who are coming to this Parliament? But next to the lobbyism and to corruption, I think the main problem for the moment in the Commission, when Ska Keller is talking about the Commission, is a lack of leadership and independence from nation states today, mainly from Paris and Berlin. The actual leadership of the Commission is always first phoning to Paris and Berlin, no, the opposite, to Berlin and Paris before acting. And that is for me the main problem today, that we have again a leadership and not longer a secretary of the Council.
Thank you. So while we go to Jean-Claude Juncker, I do remind you that you have few jokers that you can use if you want over this question. So Jean-Claude Juncker.
I can take yours.
Il est évident que nous devons.
Clearly, we need a better framework for lobby activities. Obviously, we need to fight corruption to our utmost, both in member states and at a European level. But you can't forbid interest groups from asserting their interests. But for all members and commissioners to publish the list of their contacts and their meetings so citizens know who they've been dealing with is the way. And citizens should go and vote. So it becomes a democracy. And they actually go and vote between the 22nd and the 25th to avoid the risk that the lobbyists influence the less democratic extreme right members and extreme left. So go out and vote if you want to fight the lobbyists.
It's so clear. We move to Alexis Tsipras.
Το φαινόμενο της
Corruption is structural in Europe, is systemic, particularly in the south, it must be said. And combating corruption is not just something for the member states. It's also something for the European Union as a whole. We believe that we need European legislation which is effective, which has transparency and can crack down on corruption. And we also need to get effective legislation to combat tax avoidance, tax evasion, because that's also a form of corruption and another form of economic crime. Therefore, we believe that all of these things require political will from the governments and from the leadership of the European Union, because behind them there are clashes between big interests. For example, in Italy, where the judicial authorities are trying to tackle the mafia and the nexus between that and the political world.
Corruption is a European phenomenon, he is right, and we have to fight against it. It's quite clear that places like the Commission or the European Parliament are the target of lobbying and also of corruption. What we need are common rules, not only on a European level, also on the national level. We had here this cash for law cases in the Parliament, and we had two members who presented amendments that were paid for it. One is already in one country sentenced to 4 years prison. In another country, even the trial is 4 years later not yet open. So what we need is a common understanding that fight against corruption depends not from a phone call of Barroso to Angela Merkel. This is a strange answer to your question. It depends from the will of the member states to cooperate with us. And I think the Commission should reflect that it is in our strategy of initiatives and lawmaking always very early published what we want to do, and then we deliver the whole strategy to the lobbyists. Therefore, high transparency on the lobby register on one hand, and to involve the Parliament earlier than the lobbyists. This is what we have to do as Commission.
Ska Keller asked for her joker.
Yes, because Guy Verhofstadt, you mentioned the stuff that we did in the Parliament to prevent lobbyism. Well, yes, we did this lobby register, which is voluntary. Lobbyists don't have to register, and I wonder what sort of measure this is against lobbyism. We have to also tackle conflict of interest. We need to have a register in this European Parliament about the side income also of the members of the European Parliament. I think there you also have quite a few things to declare, Mr. Verhofstadt. No. We need to be transparent about our lawmaking in every sense. And I think it's also not very helpful, Mr. Schulz, that you've stopped Transparency International from investigating.
Your time is gone. Your time is gone, and he has something to tell. So, your joker.
Well, maybe Ska Keller is not doing it, but I'm using the transparency register of the European Parliament, Ska, with my mandates in it, with what I gain. Very open, so that every journalist, and there are many journalists in Europe, can look to it and can see what are my mandates and so on. So I'm an open, transparent member of this Parliament. Do the same. Hopefully you do the same.
Very good.
Okay, shall we move to another topic? Here, we've presented you as the official candidates. But there are so many people out there pretending that maybe none of you is going to be the next president of the European Commission. How do you answer this, Ska Keller?
Well, I think there is a high chance that one of us will be the Commission president. And I really think it should be that way. Because for the citizens to elect their Commission president, that is a great leap forward in European democracy. And it is in the Treaty of Lisbon. And if the member states would, conditional, would dare to pick somebody else, they would overrule the Lisbon Treaty, because the treaty is very clear that they would deal a great blow to European democracy. So I think they should respect the voice of the citizens, else next 5 years. They can't tell anybody why they didn't go to vote. They can't complain about the voter turnout, because this is really what matters. We wanted to make it more democratic. We wanted to put faces on the campaign. We wanted to make the campaigns more European. So here's what we got. Here's where we are. And it's up to the member state to respect the European law.
Guy Verhofstadt.
Well, I think it's unthinkable that we shall take somebody outside the candidates. We can agree on that, I think. Yeah, that's the first big agreement today in this debate. But no, seriously, it can only be one of the candidates, because otherwise we can close the doors of this European Parliament. And we can close the doors of European democracy if it was only a little game that we shall play every 5 years. And that then the member states are coming together after closed doors and taking somebody else. So that is not allowed. And secondly, we agreed also with the political parties on the European level to say the candidate has to build up a majority. It's not necessarily the candidate who is the biggest after the election. He can do a first try. That's the idea. He can do a first try. That's normal. That are the rules of parliamentary democracy, Sky. That is that first who has the best result can try to build up this democracy. But certainly nobody outside the candidate.
Jean-Claude Juncker.
The 28 Prime Ministers and governments have signed the Lisbon Treaty. The Parliament has ratified it, and it provides for the European Council, having taken into account the elections of the European Parliament, or having held appropriate consultations to take into account the elections of the European Parliament. If the European Council or certain members of the European Council do not do this, this would be a denial of democracy. It is quite clear if we do not respect the results of the European elections, no one will go and vote in 2019, because we will be giving the message that the heads of state and government are important and that citizens don't count. I want the citizens' votes to count more in Europe.
Alexis Tsipras.
Well, one positive step towards more democracy has taken place already. And now people seem to be challenging even that and questioning even that. And we've got to get people in here and not turn more people off and turn them into Eurosceptics. And now I hope no one is saying that, no one really thinks that it should be someone who is not here tonight who would be the next President of the Commission. We have had disastrous policies which have borne down heavily on the grassroots, and if we carry on down that path, then there will be a backlash from people outside and from citizens. And I want to hear from the other candidates who was responsible for the disastrous policies which we've seen over recent times. I think that Europe has got to have more democracy going forward. Otherwise, the whole dream, the whole vision is going to dissipate for all of us, unfortunately.
Interesting question, and every day I'm obliged to answer 20 times to the question.
I'm afraid so.
No, absolutely clear. I think the heads of states and governments are free to do what they want to do behind closed doors, but this is finished, that the President of the European Commission is the result of a backroom deal. This is finished. One of the candidates here, she or he, will be the next President of the European Commission. And if they really would dare to nominate another one, the answer is quite clear. He gets no majority in the European Parliament, quite easy, because no member of the European Parliament will vote for him. Therefore, I think... And there is one interesting thing, one interesting element. No single head of state or government expressed that view until today. Only Angela Merkel said there is no automatism. Yeah, that's true. Also in Germany, there's no automatism in the constitution that she is always chancellor. She had also to build a coalition. But
Time.
Yeah, I didn't use a joker, so I take this.
You get your joker. Okay.
I use this 5 seconds to tell you the next President of the European Commission is standing here, and you are just speaking with him.
Well, I think many of them will use the joker in this case, but
Well,
let
no,
me
we shall
tell
not
you-
use the joker. It shall be the citizens who use the joker.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's move.
After
the very
phone call
last
to
question.
believe.
Yeah, let's move to the very last
The
question.
citizens shall use their
because
joker.
you're going to have 30 seconds each because we're going very close to the conclusion. It's gone here. So the final question is about vision. So tell us why the citizens should vote for you. Ska Keller, 30 seconds.
My offer to you, citizens of Europe, people living in Europe, to be more precise, is that I will focus to make Europe deliver on jobs, on social protection, and on climate change, that we will revive the European dream of caring for everybody, creating a Europe of the people living in there. Let us reclaim Europe. Let's do that until 25th of May, but also afterwards. That is my offer to you.
Give her Hofstad.
I want to do a lot of things that I can't tell it in 30 seconds, I have to tell you. But in any way, what the main thing is, we need, again, leadership in the European Union, a vision for the future, because that is what our citizens are wanting. That is what they want to see from the leader of the Commission. And to do three things: fixing the economy, jobs, jobs, jobs. That are my three priorities for the next 5 years. I did it.
You made it. Jean-Claude Juncker.
Je veux une Europe.
I'd like a Europe which doesn't cultivate its divisions. I'd like to put an end to these artificial divisions between North and South, old and new member state, young and old. I'd like a Europe of consensus, of compromise, wise compromise. I'd like a Europe which allows the Europeans to fall back in love with Europe.
Alexis Tsipras.
Θα χρησιμοποιήσω, I will use my jokers also.
Okay.
Πρώτα απ' όλα θέλω...
First of all, we want a Europe which belongs to the peoples, a Europe of peoples. We want to support solidarity and democracy. Decisions must be taken, and the citizens must decide on the big things with referendums, not backroom deals behind closed doors, not in a way which subjugates public will and the popular will. Secondly, immediately, we must put paid to the Troika, banish it from the European institutions, and say finis to that. Thirdly, we need a European procedure for dialogue and to get a sustainable solution for the debt, to get us out of the crisis on the basis of democracy and social cohesion and democracy. Thank you.
We move to Martin Schulz.
We are living in our house in Europe. We call it the European house, and we must open the doors and the windows and to give the citizens the chance to look what happens in the house and who is deciding about them. And I want the European Union, the Commission, putting the interests of ordinary citizens first. I served as a mayor, as a local councillor, long-serving member of the parliament. I know that people are suffering in Europe, and I want to change Europe into a better life for everybody, especially with a chance for the young generation to get a better future in the European Union.
Thank you very much. But let me say that there is very little out of program that all the candidates agreed on, because I think that Ska Keller can give us a few seconds while Connor joined me. So just a second. Ska Keller.
We've been debating Europe today, but we shouldn't forget that people elsewhere are suffering, that they're suffering from poverty and hardship and war and persecution. And just as one symbol that we care about this is that we're participating, all of us together today, in the Bring Back Our Girls campaign.
Thank you. Thanks to the candidate, even for this. Our debate is over. And I'm going to ask Conor what happened out there while we were talking.
Well, let me tell you that we had 63,000 tweets, 15,000 people engaged here on Twitter and online. So you can check out EurovisionDebate.tv for a more detailed analysis.
Well, you've heard the candidates, and you know what they had to say. Now it's up to you.
Our thanks to all of you who've taken part in this unique event wherever you are. Don't forget, you can continue to take part in the discussion online. Check out our website, EurovisionDebate.tv.
And that's all for tonight here from Brussels, from all the team of the European Parliament. Have a very good night.